Before anything had a name, before time had numbers and the sky had directions, there was stillness, not silence. It's not nothingness. Stillness, a sacred kind of presence, so full it felt like the world was holding its breath. And in that place, if you can call it that, you existed, not as someone, not as a role or identity. You were more like awareness itself. It's the kind that listens without ears and sees without eyes. The kind that doesn't rush because there's nowhere to be. No clock to race, no deadline to meet. There was no before or after, only is. And within that is, you were something rare. You were a keeper of the pause. You were the guardian of the gap between everything. You were the guardian of stillness. Let's pause right here, because it's easy to confuse stillness with emptiness. But they're not the same. Stillness isn't absence. It's fullness that doesn't need to shout. It's truth that doesn't need to explain itself. It's presence, deep, undeniable, and patient. You didn't guard something like a soldier. You didn't patrol a border. Your guarding wasn't about protection. It was about preserving space. Holding space for what could be. Holding space so the universe could exhale. In that role you witnessed, you saw entire realities unfold like petals. Slowly, gently, with purpose. And when those realities ended, you didn't mourn. You simply noticed, because you understood. Nothing truly ends. It just moves, shifts, forgets, then remembers. Stillness wasn't static. It pulsed. Not like a heartbeat, but like a wave. Slow wave that cradled everything, and you moved with it. Not like a dancer, but like a mountain that breathes in centuries. You didn't need movement to feel alive. You didn't need change to feel growth. You were content. Not out of passivity, but out of knowing. You knew that everything rushed towards something, but few things paused to become. You were the pause. And that pause was sacred, but something shifted, not in the stillness, but in you. A ripple formed, subtle but insistent. You began to wonder, what would it be like to move, not just as energy, but as matter, not just to witness form, but to become it, not just to hold space for experience, but to have one. And with that wondering, something opened. A crack in the quiet, a doorway, an invitation. And you, the one who had never needed anything, said yes. The moment you said yes, you felt the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. The stillness didn't vanish. It stepped back, made room, because you were no longer just the witness. You were becoming the experiencer. It started subtly. Time, not as numbers on a clock, but as sensation, as before and after, as now and not yet. You felt your awareness stretch, like a thread being pulled gently through fabric. And on the other side of that pull there was sound, movement, choice. You were entering a world where stillness was no longer the default, it was the exception. Your form took shape slowly, not all at once. It wasn't like being born. It was like being remembered into a new body. Flesh wasn't the first thing you noticed. It was rhythm, the thump of a heart, the inhale of breath, flicker of emotion as it rises and disappears. You had never felt these things from the inside before. As the guardian of stillness, you had seen emotions bloom and pass from a distance, like clouds shifting above the earth. But now you were inside the weather, and it was disorienting. Beautiful, heavy. You felt need. You felt hunger, not just for food, but for answers, for meaning, for more. And suddenly, stillness wasn't your home anymore. It was your longing.
Ow.
This world, this realm of movement, didn't hate stillness. It just forgot it. And you, now bound by skin and story, began forgetting too. You remembered your name here, but not why you came. You followed schedules. You learned urgency. You joined the race without realizing there was one. You adapted. And in that adapting, you forgot how to pause. You forgot how to be without becoming. It wasn't your fault. It was part of the process. Because to truly understand stillness, you had to lose it. And even in your forgetting, something held on. A thread, a whisper. On quiet nights, when the world slowed just enough, you'd feel it. Pull. A hush in your chest that didn't come from exhaustion, but from memory. A memory without images, without language. It's just presence. And even though you couldn't name it, it comforted you. Yeah. Because it reminded you of something you didn't know you'd lost. Stillness wasn't gone. It was waiting for you to notice. The call didn't come in words. It came in the form of discomfort. That gnawing feeling when you're surrounded by noise, yet something inside you whispers, "This isn't it." That invisible tug when your calendar is full, but your soul feels empty. That ache that shows up in quiet moments, not of pain, but of missing something you can't name. You tried to fill it with achievements, with conversation, with motion, always more motion, but still it returned. Not louder, just deeper. That soft gravity pulling you inward, back to something older than ambition. You didn't know it at the time, but that ache wasn't a flaw. It was a signal. Stillness hadn't forgotten you. It was calling you home. You began noticing the spaces between things. Not just the words people spoke, but the silence they were afraid to sit in. Not just the actions, but the moments before them. You began craving slowness. Not because you were tired, but because you were ready. You were waking up. Not dramatically, not all at once. But something in you was peeling back layers. Reaching beneath the stories you'd been told. Looking for the place where breath didn't need explanation, where just being was enough. And in that looking, you found something unexpected. Grief. Grief for the time you'd spent chasing instead of listening. Grief for the versions of yourself that learned to be fast when what you needed was space. Grief for the stillness you'd once carried like breath, and then buried under doing. But beneath that grief, recognition. The kind that doesn't come with a voice, but with a quiet yes in your bones. Yes, I remember. Yes, I know this. Yes, I was this before the noise. And just like that, for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, you paused. Not out of exhaustion, but out of reverence. You didn't need a forest retreat or a meditation app. You just sat. And the stillness came back. Not as a thunderclap. Not as a flood. But like a friend who never stopped waiting. And in that moment, you remembered who you were. Not in titles, not in roles, but in being. You weren't here to escape the world. You were here to carry stillness into it, to remind the rushing that there is a rhythm beneath the speed, to remind the striving that rest is not retreat, it's return. You had been the guardian of stillness once. Now, you were being invited to become it again. Returning to stillness didn't mean stepping away from life. It meant stepping into it. Fully, honestly, without running. You still had responsibilities, people to care for, bills to pay, dreams that pulled at your sleeves like little children wanting to be seen. But now you carried a center, a kind of grounded presence that moved slower than the world around you. Not because it couldn't keep up, but because it knew there was no race. You began to see differently. Every conversation held more than words. Every pause had meaning. Even waiting in traffic became a kind of meditation, a moment where breath could rise and fall without judgment. You weren't above life. You were simply inside it with your eyes open. Stillness didn't disconnect you. It reconnected you to everything. You started listening again. Not just to people, but to space. You felt the energy of a room before anyone spoke. You sensed when someone's silence was louder than their smile. And most surprisingly, you started hearing yourself, not the voice in your head, the one beneath it. The voice that doesn't shout, doesn't plead, doesn't demand. The one that whispers, "You're okay, even now." You don't need to rush. You are allowed to simply be. That voice had been drowned for years, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. Now it was rising again. And every time you paused, for a breath, for a glance out the window, for nothing at all, you felt more you, not more productive. Not more clever, just more present. And that was enough. But let's be honest, it wasn't always easy. Stillness is radical in a world that profits from your distraction. Sometimes you'd feel the pressure creeping in again. Shouldn't I be doing more? Am I falling behind? What if people think I've stopped caring? But then you'd remember, your value isn't in how quickly you move. It's in how deeply you live. You weren't here to win time. You were here to feel it. To inhabit moments like they matter because they do. To sip seconds instead of gulping hours. And slowly you realized the world wasn't your enemy. It was just noisy, and you were learning to hear the quiet beneath it. The more you practiced stillness, the more you understood movement. Not just literal movement, but emotional, relational, mental movement. You could feel the subtle shifts in others. The way someone's shoulders tightened when they laughed, trying to mask hurt. The pause before someone said, "I'm fine," when they weren't. Stillness sharpened your perception, but softened your response. You didn't need to fix everyone. You just needed to be with them, fully, and that was enough. You became the kind of presence that made others exhale. Not because you said the right words, but because you were grounded. You were there. People could feel it, even if they didn't know how to name it. You learned to move from stillness, not away from it. Took action, but not from panic. You made choices, but not from fear of missing out. You spoke up, but not to prove anything. Your movement began to mirror the rhythm of the world behind the world, that quiet, ancient cadence beneath everything. Sometimes it looked like walking away, other times it looked like standing firm. And often, it looked like a smile in the middle of chaos. Not because everything was okay, but because you were. Stillness wasn't passivity. It was power, not the loud kind. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. There were days you forgot. Of course, you got caught in the scroll. You rushed through conversations. You filled your schedule and left no room to breathe. But now you noticed. And noticing was everything. You didn't shame yourself. You returned to yourself. Every breath was an invitation. Every moment of tension was a doorway back into presence. And gradually, stillness stopped being something you visited, became something you carried, even in rooms filled with noise. Even in days that moved too fast, because the guardian of stillness wasn't a past role. It was a living one. And you were beginning to embody it again. You didn't need to retreat to a mountaintop to feel it. You found it in grocery store lines, in conversations with loved ones, in pauses between sentences. Stillness was no longer a destination. It was a way of being. And even when the world pulled you away, you knew how to come back. Gently, quietly, fully. You returned to where it began, not with your feet, but with your awareness. To that place before time had hours, before space had edges. It's a place where stillness wasn't something to seek, but something you were. And now you see it differently, because now you know contrast. You've felt noise, you've tasted speed. You've lived the ache of forgetting and the quiet joy of remembering. Stillness isn't just a memory now, it's an earned knowing. Vibration that lives in your bones, not just in the gaps between thoughts. You no longer need the world to be quiet for you to feel peace, because you are the pause. You are the breath in the middle of the sentence. You are the soft ground in a world of hard edges. You carry what cannot be measured, and that's your gift. You've returned, yes. But not to retreat, to serve, not to escape the noise, but to become the frequency beneath it. You don't need recognition. Your presence does the work. The way your eyes soften a moment.
Ow.
the way your silence makes others speak more truthfully, the way your stillness gives people permission to slow down, to feel, to stop pretending. You are no longer guarding stillness. You are embodying it, a living invitation to remember. And if one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, you forget again, that's okay. You'll scroll too fast. You'll say yes when you meant no. You'll fill your calendar instead of your soul. But eventually something will tug at you. A soft ache, a subtle knowing, and you'll remember. You don't need to add more. You just need to return to the space between thoughts, to the version of you that never rushed, never proved, never performed. The guardian never left. They just waited. And now they're living through you. You may not have a title, you may not have a crown, but you are a lighthouse in a restless sea, a quiet presence in a loud room, space where truth can land. And in a world that spins faster every day, you are the reminder that it's okay to pause, that being is enough, that stillness is not the absence of life, it's the essence of it. Welcome back. You remember now, and through you others will too. So if the world around you ever feels too fast, too loud, too demanding, pause, close your eyes, not to escape, but to return, to the breath, to the presence, to the quiet truth beneath all things. You were never lost in time. You were simply learning how to carry stillness through it. And when you do, you don't just remember who you were, you remind the world who it can be. Still, alive, whole,